So I've been doing stuff for digital for about 23-4 years, depending on how I count. And basically, almost half of that, I've run my own studio agency with my colleagues called Nordkapp. And I serve at the board of IXDA, which is the Interaction Design Association. So if you're familiar with interaction design, you probably are familiar with IXDA as well. Basically, what we are a strategy and design consultancy for the post-normal era. So we are big fans of strategic design and customer experience. So that's kind of like, those are the two things we do really well. And I'm going to be opening up my point of view on what is strategic design in this talk as well. I've worked with all kinds of different clients globally, so anything from health to corporate IT to Nokia, kind of solving big problems. That's kind of like what I do nowadays as well. So kind of trying to figure out and help companies to navigate the big questions and find out what are the possible and preferable futures for their big problems. And as a company, we work with startups, and there's also a lot of corporations. So Finnish Railways, Telia in the Nordics, Fortum, lots of things to do with clean energy, electric car charging, things like that. So what we'll be talking about today, at least these three things. So first, the evolving role of design in business. Then second, the importance of design as a part of strategic mindset. And then the third topic is the sort of emergence of design. And I will tell you why it's in brackets as well later on, in leadership. So essentially, carrying on.
Sami,
yes.
just a comment. If you are showing slides, we are not seeing nothing. We only see a blank screen.
Oh,
we see the nice mouse cursor, but not the presentation.
Yes.
Oh, thanks for telling me now.
Yeah, I was wondering. You said long intro, so I was kind of thinking that okay, maybe something is coming up, but better later than never.
Hopping usually works, but yeah, it's peculiar. Let's do it the traditional way then. Now better.
Yes. Good.
Awesome. It's always an adventure. I've used hopping before successfully, but it's like it varies from.
Okay, now it's good.
Presentation to presentation.
Yes, off you go.
There we go. So this is what I talked about. This is what I talked about. Here's pretty pictures of stuff I've done. More pretty pictures of stuff we've done. And here. So role of design, important design in sort of one level up in strategic mindset, and the emergence of design and design skills in leadership. And I'll be touching about a bit of complexity, things like complexity, unlearning, sense making, reframing, all that kind of stuff. So that's kind of like kind of where I see design as a practice is moving in relation to development, DevOps, and I'll be touching design ops to a degree as well. So let's start from the design in business. Basically, I mean, this is nothing new. So basically, the evolution of design as a practice and a craft has been massive over the past a few decades. So basically, we've moved from the hero designer into something more transformative, and now we have basically algorithms and neural networks designing objects that were before basically just the role and the turf of the hero designer. And now the role of the craftsperson and the designer is more of a facilitator and curator. My friend Simone Rebard-Engel calls this the new alchemy, basically. So even though with traditional tools, we get into the place where us designers, basically, we get to sort of like peek into the void and figure out what are the most viable things that come from there, especially when we deal with things like machine learning, neural networks, and AI. And of course, there's the traditional stuff as well. And in general, so that good design, this is really obvious for all of us, I think. So good design isn't really an option, but it's a necessity. So if you look at the market globally, so there's companies like Xiaomi doing pretty impressive stuff on really high volumes and pretty low prices as well. And this goes into, in a sense, this same movement is happening in product and service design as well. And the sort of the Ramsian principles, what makes good design, applies still pretty well. So it's innovative, useful, aesthetic, makes the product or service understandable, doesn't get in your way. It's honest, long-lasting, and thorough to the last detail, and environmentally friendly, and as little design as possible. So this is very interesting in regards to like design operations, design systems, and all the stuff. So when we don't design so much stuff from the scratch anymore, but more or less we actually play with libraries, components, and build systems out of them, and then obviously use the system as well. So my friend Dave Malouf, my IXDA colleague, he founded the DesignoPS DesignoPS Conf Summit a few years ago, and I think he's got a really nice and broad definition of what is design operations. So he says it's everything that supports high quality crafts, methods, and processes. Right, that makes sense. And then he continues into sort of figuring out like there's the governance, tools and infrastructure, workflow, and people. So this is, if you work within large organization, this is probably something that's very familiar to you already. And he outlines this in a way that kind of like, instead of the design thinking 3 circles, and when there's like business operations, people operations, workflow operations, and these all basically are related to how he sees design operations. All of these practices need design skills to a degree. What I think it's more complex than this. So this is something we've been developing, trying to sort of sketch out how to figure out kind of like the need for design and how to measure design on several levels. So whereas design maturity, design ops very often focuses just on the product, we really want to figure out a way to kind of bring these tools to strategy and leadership as well. And there you get to measure things like design systems and time awareness, design mindset, human centricity, cultural learning, optimism, and agency or belief to the work. And then where this gets really interesting and complex is you need to figure out how these work over time as well. So here we get to the sort of importance of design as a part of strategic mindset. Like I said, I'm a big fan of strategic design, and strategic design is that a lot of people are kind of trying to verbalize at the moment. This is from the founder of Frog Design, Hartmut Esslinger. This is something really interesting. So basically, we outline the architecture of the problem. And Maurice Meyer in the University of Phoenix is doing research and to define this as well. And I agree with most of this stuff. So basically, when we talk about strategic design, there's things like service design, interaction design, behavioral design, and newer fields like organizational design, systemic design, legal design, for example. And the methods we use are the old familiar business design, design thinking, business thinking. Then, so evidence-based design basically here means working with research and figuring out that the things, validating your work. And co-design, co-creating, working with your customers, with the stakeholders. This, like someone stated in the, I think you hosted in a chat before my talk, this is absolutely essential. And then there are new fields like transition design, so figuring out how to actually design the change on an organizational level. And speculative design, how to figure out what could be, what are the artifacts that could be out there, and what are the sort of possible futures we do not want to have, and so on. So it gets pretty complex, but at the same time gets pretty important as well. So basically, Helsinki Design Lab has done really great work almost 10 years ago. So they talk about integration. They talk about things like visualization. So basically, we need to figure out what is important. We need to be able to visualize that as designers. And then we need to be able to steer the design in the right direction as well. And this is basically where this idea of strategic design meets pretty well with design operations and DevOps as well. So basically, the concepts and ideas are not enough by themselves, but instead we need to figure out how to steer them in a way that they will become reality. And basically, when we do software, when we do digital products and services, this is sort of like, this is the bread and butter. So we know how to do that. But when we get into the new business ideas, when we get to innovation or bridging the corporate strategy into practice, this is where it gets really complicated. And this is, to me, gets really interesting as well. And I think there's a lot of common denominators here for design operations, strategic design, and corporate leadership as well. So this can mean stuff like this. It's supposed to be video, but since I'm running it this mode, it isn't video. But for example, we facilitated a foresight process for City of Helsinki last fall. So figuring out what are the sort of possible futures for city marketing and city branding post-COVID, post the pandemic. So basically, our role as designers was to facilitate the project, but the most of the work was done by the client, by the marketing teams, by the people from the city themselves. And then as designers, we basically facilitate the process. And then in the end, we basically pull all of this stuff together. We synthesize it, and with their help still, actually produce films and whatever is needed to come ideas. But this way, when we are just steering and facilitating project, the ownership of the ideas and the increased skills and knowledge stays within the organization. And this is pretty important for organizations learning these new ideas as well. And then this is where it gets complex, and we get to talk about complexity as well. So basically, when we move with complex ideas and sort of when we try to figure out things on the strategic level, we need to figure out how to undesign certain ideas. We need to unlearn a lot of old information that doesn't work anymore. We need to figure out what are the official and unofficial interactions within the organization, within the teams, within the leadership. And then we need to design all of them. So official basically could mean how we work together. And then designing the unofficial interaction could mean how does the virtual coffee break within the development teams, actually, how can we facilitate that into, and the content and ideas from there into the actual organization as well. And obviously, this needs new skills like foresight to lead. We need to be able to co-design the organization, the strategies, and we need to figure out how to co-design the adaptive resources, kind of like needed to actually pull these things through. So because this is what we talk about when we talk about strategy, it's a living strategy, right? So it isn't a project that gets done, but instead it's a strategy where we have the aspiration. Then we need to figure out how should we get there and how do we want to get there. And then that needs to be measured and validated all the time. So then we go into the leadership. So this is something called streetlight effect from psychology. So the story goes that there's a drunk man in the street looking for a quarter or a keys or whatnot. And then there's a policeman, friendly policeman, police officer coming like, hey, what's wrong? Can I help you? So then they go look on for the light for a while, the keys for a while, and then we can find the thing we're looking for. Well, so are you sure that you dropped it here? And then the drunk guy goes like, no, I didn't drop it here. I'm looking for here because light is better, because I can see here. And this is a joke that describes a lot of the organizations at the moment, especially higher up you go into the leadership and middle management. So basically, a lot of people's time is spent on putting out the fires instead of figuring out what are the real problems, the most important problems to solve. So, I mean, probably many of you run back-to-back Teams meetings throughout the week, and all of your time gets into the team meetings instead of actually figuring out the importance of problems you need to solve in your daily work. And then very often we try to solve this with ideas. So I touched this earlier a bit, but basically every single organization I work with has abundance of ideas. There's not a single organization that comes to us claiming that we do not have enough ideas. Come help us with more cool ideas. No, they have a ton of ideas, but they don't know how to prioritize them. They don't know how to validate them. They don't know what are meaningful ideas and to whom necessarily. And the least, they don't know how to implement them. So this goes into sort of like in the discussion in the chat before my talk about the sort of 1 week prototypes, for example. So it's really easy to do very thorough, almost too detailed prototype of the wrong idea, right? Instead of, you can just like figure out like, this is the easiest, leanest, and best way to prototype an idea. And then you measure that, then you validate that. Then you do quantitative validation, figure out like, is this idea worth making? And that's like, that takes a week as well, but it's a very different process that can be, with a skilled individual, can be taken care of with Post-it notes if needed. And then this connects to the right questions as well. So we really, higher up the value chain we go, we really need to make sure that we are solving the right questions, because it's really, really expensive and cumbersome to solve the wrong problems too well and too fast. So this is where design comes, and design skills and design sensibility comes to play. You probably are familiar with the Knefin framework. This is something me and my colleagues have been diving in for a while now. So Knefin is a framework by Dave Snowden, and it's basically a framework designed to understand complexity. And there's like, the thesis is that everything's in a state of disorder, and there are complex, complicated, simple, and chaotic variants and systems of that. So this is something really important to understand. So we do not live in a linear world anymore. So basically, when we figure out what are the right problems to solve, then we need to figure out also what is the system where they live, what are the potential solutions, how can we sense the right questions to answer in them. So if you haven't, go check out Knefin. There's actually really, these are really good tools to figure out how to swim with complexity and how to kind of like make yourself and your organization more resilient and fragile. And kind of this is the problem we're facing with organizations as well. So basically, if you do technology, you probably know this really well. So technology changes really fast, but organizations and the structures us humans build change slower, and there's this growing gap over time that should be addressed with continuous insight and foresight to understand where the technology and the world, where our business and market is moving to, but and how can we figure out what are the best steps for the organization and leadership to take in order to respond to the changing environment. And then this sort of like, this might be a bit of unpopular opinion, but I think design systems are a gateway drug to automation and sort of non-design. So when we systematize, when we build systems of components, when we build languages, etc., it makes our job easier, but it also kind of like, it makes the design work really incremental. And yes, we have time to actually dive into growth hacking. We have time to dive into solving actual figure out what are the actual problems to solve. But then from designer's point of view, this is why designers and developers will get more strategic, creative, not just to stay on the practical level, but go deeper. And this requires systematic approach to making and learning. So basically, what we do with the product level, with design operations, research operations, DevOps, we need to figure out how to move these things levels up as well. And making the strategy, validating the strategy, and also bring these tools to leadership as well. And I mean, there are a lot of companies, growth companies, startups who are founded by designers. So this is really good validation for that this stuff works. So all of these companies are actually founded either by designers or have really strong design presence in their founding team. So design gives you the sensibility and validation to do really good things. And this is something we can learn from the corporations as well. So basically, big corporations talk about product portfolios, playbooks, and that kind of stuff. And that's sort of like, this is something that's really useful to integrate on the practical design cycle as well. So how to run experiments on the risky assumptions, how to bring in trends, technologies, and opportunities there. This is sort of like, this is the magic sauce. This is the kind of the hard stuff. And this requires taking more bird's eye view on the problems we solve as well, because you can't see this on a product level that easily. So basically, the name of the talk comes from the fact that the higher up the value chain we go, less we talk about design. You don't sell design or development or design operations or DevOps to upper management talking about them, but you need to translate this into the leadership language and figure out what are things that matter to them. So basically, we spend a lot of time working with language. So how to adapt the work we do, how to adapt the solutions we make into the organizations we work with. So once you get an organization, adapt your language, it's a small win for you as well. And then you can actually get into the implementation, then you can get into making the ideas you have into reality. Then we need to figure out sort of, these are the strategy questions, the why are we doing this? What is the aspiration? What is the goal? Which is then followed by what and how do we get there? And then what are the things we shouldn't do? And what are the things we should not do as well? What's the price in, let's say, the cryptocurrencies, a really great idea, but at the same time, they have a massive environmental price in them. So we need to be able to build systems that kind of loop between the reality and the possible and potential futures we have. So how to figure out what are the stories, things, narratives, what are the probes and experiments we can do to actually move ourselves slowly into the best possible direction. Not to aim for the utopia, because those are very often, visions of utopias are very rarely true, but instead figure out how to find the protopia in there, how to get a little bit in the right direction every single day, which has a massive effect in the long run. So building the future is a systemic challenge. And that's why I'm talking about the 3 levels here as well. So just figure out how to operate and measure design in the product development. It is not enough. We need to really find the language and tools and capabilities to connect this stuff throughout the whole value chain, from leadership into the strategy implementation, and then into the product design and service design. So it's a systems challenge, and we need to figure out throughout all touch points. So electric cars, they require massive infrastructure to run as well. They require a behavior change. They need whole new kinds of language and expression. They need massive production lines to happen. So it's an example of massive systems change we need to be able to solve and support in order to make a better future. Thank you. Good luck. I think that was exactly 20 minutes.
Hey, thank you, Sami. That was really insightful talk here. We have a couple of comments and questions here. Let's start with the easy ones. So, drip or immersion brewing? Lauri asks. It's about the coffee.
I'm more of a espresso guy myself. I've gone through my AeroPress hipster drip phase, but now I have a proper espresso machine.
Cool.
Kind of like I'm an industrial guy in that sense.
Yes. All right, then we have a talk about the environmental friendly and concept called sustainable. Jouni Linkola comment there and Lauri response there. What are your ideas on like sustainable software development? Do you see that?
It's a big mess. So I mean, I'll always look at the idea of sustainability from the bird's eye view. So, but yeah, environmental friendly, sustainable. I guess in terms of like software development, that goes back to ideas like reducing waste. And then from my point of view as a designer, we need to figure out what are the right things to do instead of just doing. So kind of like sustainable design and development comes into solving the right problem and then being conscious about how do you solve them as well.
Cool.
It's handy where we big, but that's kind of like that's how I see it.
Maybe a topic for another talk then. Yes, Tuomas comments about the lamppost metrics. This is so common in measuring DevOps as well. We track things that are available to us instead of what we should be tracking. Yeah. Yeah, and that's human nature basically. So when we get busy, we tend to deprioritize what's important almost too easily, I think. Then Lauri comments, what should we measure to most quickly validate our underlying hypothesis? Close quotes, look for evidence that disconfirms your assumption. That's nice comment.
I think that's really good. And I'm sort of what people tend to forget very often is sort of like you should attack the area's biggest problem in the room right away, and figure out what is the riskiest assumption you can actually devalidate, and figure out that doesn't work. So be bold in that respect.
Yes. Christopher comments, leadership language tend to be money.
Yeah. Yes, and that is why we need to adapt to that language. So it is not just money. But it's more about figuring out why the money, why the numbers, why the metrics. Because I mean, I've run in the cases where that's like, at first glance, it seems that it's about money. But then when you actually when you talk to stakeholders higher up, then you figure out they have their own metrics and they have their own numbers to reach. And then you need to figure out the way to how to facilitate and how to work with their goals as well. This kind of like goes into the sort of like the paradox of design disappearing in the system as well. So basically, a lot of my work nowadays I think it's close to invisible until something comes out from somewhere. But there's a lot of sort of like leadership management consulting happening in the background. Figure out how to make our clients look good within their organization or within their audience.
Good.
So definitely less about pixels now.
Yes. Then a couple of comments. Thomas comments, Hopetopia, great term. Did I hear Protopia or was it Hopetopia?
It's Protopia, but Protopia. So it's a term by Kevin Kelly a decade ago. But actually, I really like Hopetopia as well.
Yeah, that's cool.
I might steal that. Sorry, Thomas.
Yes, we have still time. Couple of questions and comments before we continue with Z. Tuomas has a question. What is the process of pivoting a product concept that is almost developed already? Is it through the money people, or can designers and developers easily talk directly to each other and decide to tear down whatever was done already?
The process will be painful. I would say designers, developers should be talking constantly. Those are hard things. So basically, you need to be able to kill your darlings on all levels, and that's sort of like the higher up you go, the more you need to figure out how to actually tell the story of why it needs to be killed. So what are the metrics, and what's the evidence, and then how will you recover from that as well? It's always very complicated, but if you need to pivot a product that's almost developed already, there's a fair chance that there are some assumptions that haven't been validated and hypotheses that haven't been validated along the way. It's always painful.
Definitely. Tuuli would like to see the process slide again, if possible. Maybe we can park your presentation there. It was the picture after unpopular opinion about design systems.
This one, maybe.
Process slide, it doesn't seem. Maybe this one? Huh? Maybe Tuuli can comment there.
I think this is closest to process.
Yeah, Tuuli comments that that's the one. Good. All right. And then Mikko asks, what would you say are a couple of the most important new skills a future-oriented designer should acquire? What about habits?
That's a really good question. I'm a big fan of sort of curiosity and openness as a habit, and basically because the world's changing so fast, so you need to be able to stay on top of the change, and you need to be able to not try to read and view everything, but more or less figure out what are the things and ideas that matter to you from your personal point of view. So it comes down to a lot of like personal growth as well. So figure out where you stand, why you are the person and professional you are. For the skills, a lot of that stuff goes down into people skills, I think. So kind of co-design, leadership, facilitation, and all in general, sort of being really good with uncertainty and ambiguity, and also being able to help others to be really good with uncertainty and ambiguity. Those are really important. Then it comes down to sort of like being able to visualize things, being able to communicate as well. So I think the Helsinki Design Labs, sort of like the stewardship, visualization, and integration, they are really high level abstract skills, but I think they're pretty good in that respect. But it comes down to communication, things like that, a lot.
Thanks. And maybe as a last question, Lauri asks, do you see as the most fundamental differences between finding the right design for a tangible product versus a digital service?
It's a lot easier to prototype a digital service.
Okay.
So basically, well, tangible physical products, you can 3D print prototype them as well, but they are so much more simple. They are more sort of like, they are a kind of crystallization of a person's vision of an object, right? And obviously, if they are some kind of connected products, they have functionality as well. But with digital services, then you need to figure out what are, for example, the moments that matter to the users, who are the users, and then you can actually start almost indefinitely prototype them and figure out what are the best ways to do that. And digital services are never ready, really. So in a sense, everything always is a prototype of something, the next better version.
Yeah, that was a really nice closing here. Let's thank Sami for a great presentation, and also all of you guys who joined, commented and had questions. So thank you, Sami, very much.
Thank you.